The 7:42 morning train out of Millbrook. Station smelled like coffee and wet umbrellas, and Walter Hayes had learned over the past 2 years to love that smell more than he loved most things in his life. It meant movement. It meant a window seat and 45 minutes where nobody needed anything from him. Since Margaret died, Walter had built his days around small mercies like that one, a quiet train car, a paperback he wasn't really reading, the particular gray light of a Tuesday morning. He was 58 years old, 26 of those years spent in the army, and he had come home from more dangerous places than this railway line, more times than he could count. But nothing in his service had prepared him for the strange, hollow quiet of a house built for two people now occupied by one. He didn't notice the woman until she dropped into the seat beside him, like she'd been shoved. She was younger than his daughter would have been, late 20s, maybe, in a gray coat that looked expensive but wrinkled, like she'd slept in it or hadn't slept at all. Her hands were shaking. Not dramatically, just a small contained tremor, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't the sort of man trained to notice tremors, to notice the difference between cold and fear. Walter had spent half his career learning to read a room for danger. This woman was radiating it. "I am so sorry," she whispered, not quite looking at him. "I need you to do something strange. And I know I have no right to ask. And you can say no, I promise I'll understand. But there's a man 3 rows back. He's my ex. He's not supposed to know I'm on this train. If he sees me alone, he's going to come over here. And I can't do that today. Not today." Her voice cracked on the last word in a way that told Walter this wasn't the first time this man had cornered her, and it likely wouldn't be the last unless something changed. "What do you need?" Walter said. Not a question. A soldier's response, and assess then act. Just pretend, for the ride. Pretend you're my husband. He won't come near me if he thinks I'm not alone. He's a coward like that. He only shows his teeth when he thinks I have no one. She finally looked at him, and Walter saw something in her eyes he recognized from 30 years of watching young soldiers walk into their first firefight, the particular exhaustion of someone who has been afraid for so long that fear has become simply the temperature of their life. "Name's Walter," he said, extending a hand like he was greeting an old friend, loud enough to carry. "And who do I have the pleasure of being married to this morning?" Something in her face broke open with relief. "Emily," she breathed. "Emily Carter. Well, Hayes, I guess, for the next hour." "Emily Hayes," Walter said, testing it like he was trying on a coat. "Has a nice ring to it." She let out a laugh that was half a sob, and Walter understood in that moment exactly what his role was going to be. Not a bodyguard, not a hero, just a steady, boring, unremarkable presence. The kind of husband nobody looks twice at, because nothing about him suggests a woman beside him is unprotected. The man came 10 minutes later. Walter heard him before he saw him. The particular gait of someone who walks like the world owes him space, shoes slapping the aisle floor with the confidence of a man who has never once considered that a room might not belong to him. He was younger than Walter by a couple decades, dressed like money that hadn't quite arrived yet, and when he stopped at their row, his eyes went straight past Walter like he wasn't there at all. Didn't know you were taking this train." His voice was pleasant in the practiced way of men who have learned that charm gets further than threats, right up until it doesn't. "You didn't answer my texts." "I've been busy, Daniel." Emily's voice had gone flat, controlled, the voice of someone reciting lines she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head for exactly this moment. Daniel's eyes finally landed on Walter, and Walter watched the calculation happen behind them, assessing, dismissing, recalculating. "And who's this? Your father?" Walter didn't rise to it. He'd faced down men far more dangerous than this one, in places where the wrong word could get a whole unit killed, and he'd learned that the loudest reaction was rarely the smartest one. He simply extended his hand again, the same easy, unhurried motion. "Walter, Emily's husband." He let the word sit there, plain as a fact of geography. "You a friend of hers?" Something flickered across Daniel's face. Surprise, maybe, or the particular indignity of a man discovering the story he'd told himself about a woman was no longer true. "Husband," he repeated like the word tasted bad. "Since when?" "Long enough," Walter said. and put his arm along the back of Emily's seat, not touching her, just present. A wall built out of calm instead of aggression. Is there a problem here? No, Daniel said too quickly, the charm cracking at the edges to reveal something colder underneath. No problem. Just catching up with an old friend. Well, Walter kept his voice level, kind even. The voice he used to use with young privates who needed steadying, not scolding. She looks like she'd rather catch up some other time. Man learns to read that pretty quick, being married. For a moment, something ugly passed behind Daniel's eyes. The look of a man who is used to getting his way through sheer persistence, recalculating whether persistence would work here. Walter held his gaze without blinking, without raising his voice, without giving him a single thing to push against. 26 years in uniform teaches a man that the most dangerous stillness is the kind that isn't afraid. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then, with the practiced ease of someone protecting his own image more than anything else, he forced a smile. Good to see you're doing well. Awesome, he said and walked back down the aisle. His footsteps softer this time, less certain. Emily didn't move for a long moment after he'd gone. Then her shoulders sagged all at once, like a puppet with its strings cut, and she pressed both hands over her face and breathed long, shuddering breaths that she'd clearly been holding for longer than just this train ride. He does this, she said finally quietly into her hands. Shows up. Everywhere I go. Work. My sister's building. The gym I stopped going to because of it. I moved apartments and he found the new one in a week. My friends think I'm exaggerating, because he's so normal around other people. Charming, reasonable, nobody believes me that it's different when it's just us. I believe you, Walter said, and he meant it plainly without performance. Seen men like that before. Charm's a tool, same as anything else. Some men use it to open doors. Others use it to keep people from noticing what they're doing behind them. Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her coat, and for the first time since she'd sat down, she really looked at him, not as an escape route, but as a person. Why'd you help me? You don't know me. Walter considered the question the way he considered most things, slowly, without needing to fill the silence. Had a daughter, he said finally. Would have been about your age now. Lost her and my wife both, different years, different reasons. House gets quiet when that happens. Man starts to wonder what he's still around for. He turned his wedding ring, out of habit, though the hand it used to belong to was 3 years gone. Figure if I can't be a husband to my own wife anymore, or a father to my own girl, least I can do is stand next to somebody who needs standing next to. Didn't cost me anything. Cost you everything, looks like. Carrying that fear around by yourself. Emily's eyes filled again, but differently this time. Not fear, something softer. I'm going to report him, she said, like she was deciding it out loud for the first time. Properly. With everything. I've been so scared nobody would believe me, but you didn't even blink. You just stood there, like it was obvious. It was obvious, Walter said simply. You didn't do anything wrong. He's the one who ought to be looking over his shoulder, not you. They rode the rest of the way in an easy quiet, the kind that comes after a storm passes. And somewhere around the 4th stop, Emily pulled out her phone and, hand steadier now, began typing what Walter suspected was the beginning of a report she'd been too afraid to file for longer than she probably wanted to admit. He didn't ask. He just let her have the space to do it, the way you let a wound breathe. When the train pulled into her stop, Emily gathered her bag and stood, then paused, looking down at him with an expression that held more gratitude than words could easily carry. Thank you, Walter Hayes, for being my husband for an hour. Anytime, Mrs. Hayes, he said, and the joke landed soft between them, warm instead of hollow. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are you going to be okay? The quiet house, I mean. Walter looked out the window at the platform, at the gray morning light, at a life that had felt, for one train ride, a little less empty than it had in a long while. Might not be quiet forever, he said. Funny thing about being needed, even for an hour. Reminds a man he's still got something left to give. Emily smiled, a real one, unguarded. The first Walter had seen from her, and stepped off the train into a morning that, for the first time in longer than she could remember, didn't feel like something to be afraid of. She didn't look back with longing, and Walter didn't watch her go with anything but quiet satisfaction. This wasn't a beginning for the two of them. It was simply a moment where two people, both carrying their own kind of aloneness, had found a way to carry each other's weight for 45 minutes. And that had been enough for her to walk away safer, and for him to remember that he still had something worth offering the world. The train pulled forward. Walter picked his paperback back up, and for the first time in 2 years, he actually read a few pages, the quiet in his chest a little less hollow than it had been that morning.